We're back.
Hello, everybody. Part two. The internet does not like us tonight,
Yes,
and
apparently not.
we are forging forward on Shifters, and beginning with the enigma of the Ozarks Howler.
Yes. I guess for anyone that's not familiar with the Ozark Howler,
Yes,
it's sort of even the description of it has kind of changed over time.
it has. It has. I rather like, from the article. I think a 2019 article. The Ozarks themselves become mythical shapeshifters, which is a bit tongue in cheek.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's actually referencing a podcast that we won't name, that that says that the Ozark Mountains span from Arizona to Texas.
Yeah. They shifted west, apparently, and south.
Apparently we've moved, but in this particular article it describes the Ozark Howler as massive, quadrupedal, four-legged creature with dark shaggy hair, large horns on its head, glowing red eyes, sharp claws and teeth, and a creepy howl that sounds like a combination of a wolf's call and a hyena's laugh. It appears to be nocturnal and is thought to stay in caves during the daylight hours. It is also known by other names: the Black Howler, the Mountain Howler, the Nightshade Bear, the Hoo-Hoo, the Wampus Cat, the Whistler, the Devil Cat, and interestingly enough, in this article, the Banshee.
Isn't that interesting?
Oh, also answers to the name of Lucky.
It just needs a bell around its neck.
Yeah. I'll get Krampus to work on that.
Okay. But I think that is a good indication of just how this is sort of morphed. Traditionally, it was more mundane.
Yes, very much so. And more specifically, in many cases, just I think a hill folk name for a panther.
For a panther, sometimes described as more canine, but really more cat.
More cat than anything else. And I did like this. I did like this quote. The fact, this is a quote from that article: the fact that the Ozark Howler has become a 21st century resident of the online world makes this journey even more interesting. And I would agree with that. And
I do too.
it's I think it's fair at this point on online. We need to clarify online, not in real life.
Yeah.
The internet is not a real place, although we all believe that it is. Is that online, the Ozark Howler is making its way up there alongside Slender Man, Mothman, Skinwalkers, even more highly traditional cryptids like Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster.
I think it's interesting though that you started off with Slender Man. I think that's apropos because Slender Man, by definition, is fictional.
Yes. Yes.
Some people will be disappointed at that, but it was a fictional story created on the internet.
Yes.
and has taken on a life of its own, so to speak. Whereas the Howler existed in lore for a couple hundred years and then has sort of just become a rock star on the internet.
Yes. I hope he's enjoying his royalties. And
I hope so.
To make some counterpoint comparisons on this, the tradition, again, like puncturing people's expectations in this regard, your Ozark howler traditionally falls into the same category as folkloric creatures that if you know better, you know that you're in on the joke too.
Right. It's a wink wink situation.
It is. And my introduction, so this is interesting for me. My introduction to the Ozarks howler comes from a handful of books that were written primarily as we're winking at our audience. This is for a tourist to pick up. It is more about hill folk culture, and then, oh, by the way, there's stuff in the hills. And so I'm had a passing interest on the howler, but this is in the same category as the Gowrow, the Jimplecoot, the side hill hoofer, which is my favorite. And we, I understand these are, and for people who are not familiar with Ozarks culture, we make stuff up to fool people who don't know any better, but everybody who knows better knows better.
Exactly. And that's how you tell the outsiders from the insiders.
It is also why because I also didn't really take any of that particularly seriously. And I want to be clear, there are cryptid and folkloric creatures that I do take seriously.
Same.
And so for people to understand that situation, consequently, when as editor-in-chief that I get my first call from an LA reality TV show producer is saying, can you put us in contact with someone who has experienced or encountered the Ozark howler? I'm like, what? No, I can't. Nor can I find someone who's found a side hill hoofer. Yes. Although I'd like to. I mean, who wouldn't like a side hill hoofer? So, and for people who don't know, a side hill hoofer is sort of like an antelope, except its legs are shorter on one side than the other, which means it can run really fast as long as it's running alongside a ridge. But if you manage to spook it and get it onto flatland, it just topples over.
Kind of like a fainting goat.
Yeah, exactly. and a fictional an animal that falls into this that I think would be more understood outside of the Ozarks would be a jackalope.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good analogy. And as far as the shifter part of this, I think that part of the legend has grown more with the internet too. Yeah.
And what is beginning to happen in many cases is that Ozark howlers are getting conflated with booger dogs and booger cats.
Yes. And so if you're just reading things casually, you're getting this amalgamation of everything, thrown in the stew pot together, basically.
It is. And now both from Vance Randolph's writings for a more currently contemporary take, Brandon Weston, ozarkhealing.com, who is a published author as well, based in Arkansas, did a really nice job of collating that particular information. But what in this particular case that we're talking about, so for booger dogs and booger cats, okay, backing up on that, the word booger does not mean what you pick out of your nose. It comes from the Scottish boggart or boggart, which Harry Potter fans will recognize the term boggart, coming from the traditional Scottish etymology of bogle, basically meaning a spirit.
Right.
And more specifically, a troublesome spirit that how we would also consider a poltergeist. So that, but obviously not German, which is why we have a Scottish word for it instead of a German word for it.
Yes.
All that all the way around, the booger dogs and booger cats have sort of two delineations. One of them is that they're death omens, and they function as phantoms. We've talked a lot about this, but in this particular case, they are witch animals.
Yes.
Which is bringing us more into the realm of shifters.
Right, and can shift. And I guess in some versions, the witch themselves becomes a bigger
The
dog or cat.
yes, and in
I guess
some
that's being your own familiar.
right, saves on travel cost.
There you go.
Why bring a familiar when you can become your own? So now, and that is an interesting aspect in terms of the three lores that we're dealing with, the three broad geographic lores that we're dealing with. We're essentially dealing with African, European, and North American lore coming together.
Right.
And interestingly enough, in all three cases, there is some similarity. There's a number of sort of intersection points for the lore, even before the lore got all mixed up together in North America with the development of the United States. So there's animals that are associated with witchcraft, typically black, or animals associated with the night, and that might be why the black cat is so much so, because cats are associated with witchcraft, and then cats are also associated with night, and then you add a black color on top of that. Black cats, black dogs, owls, or other night creatures all are associated here.
Yes, they are all potential shifters, and also potentially a witch themselves, and omens of bad fortune, or that a witch is out to get you, all of those things. And those beliefs are very much a part of the traditional lore in the Ozarks.
Very much so. And I think just resting on this for a moment, when we're dealing with shapeshifting, this is the basic structure of the story. Farmer is experiencing predation, is losing livestock, for example, or even worse, that perhaps one of their children is being stalked by a large black predator.
Right. And on a very real sense, and especially the early Ozarks, that could happen with of course, wild dogs, wild cats,
wolves,
coyotes, mountain lions, catamounts, often they were called here. So it's that easy jump to we have this thing lurking around, and it's so bold, it's even coming up in the yard and threatening the children. It must be something more than just your average dog or cat.
Yes, and I think in that twilight threshold space of human consciousness, particularly if the animal is acting in a way that is unusual for those animals.
Right. And that can happen. Illness could be just, a bad season and being extra hungry, and just an aberration too.
Yes. And then at the point where presumably the lore takes over, a farmer shoots the animal, nothing happens. That adds to the weirdness of the situation.
Right.
And then ultimately casts some silver bullets, shoots the animal again. The animal collapses. He goes to look, and instead of a dog or a wolf or a cat, it is instead a human being.
Right. Which of course accidents happen, and particularly we don't really think of it as much now, but people tended to walk a lot more than they used to, and at night, travel at night, walking because it was cool, cooler temperatures, etc. So I'm sure those situations occurred, and then suddenly it's, oh, this
Ooh,
man, this woman must have been a witch.
right. Which, and then the other side is maybe they were.
That's true. It's, well, it's impossible to prove a negative. So
Well, either way, they're not saying a whole lot at this point. So
that's true. They're not denying it anyway at this point. Sorry.
Must have happened. It reminds me of the meme. Is that I saw, and I'm not implying violence on anyone, so don't take that, but disclaimer there. But the meme said, quote, "Saw a werewolf on the subway today, or possibly just a very hairy man. Either way, the silver bullets worked."
Exactly. I mean, that's how a lot of lore starts.
Now, what is fascinating to me is that in terms of North American, or Native American, African, and European tradition, we have a strong body of lore that associates essentially witchcraft, not necessarily malevolent witchcraft, although it is oftentimes perceived that way, or within the story it is malevolent, is associated with turning into an animal and then turning back.
Well, I think in part because the ability to do so would denote a lot of power.
Yes.
Secret knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And that that they are the conduit for something that mere mortals, can't do or can't affect. So, and some people might not like this comparison either. Don't shoot the messenger, but it works a lot the same way as organized religion, as being the conduit to the divine.
Yes, I think that's extremely fair in terms of all of these. It again, it denotes cosmic power.
Yes, I think so, and all three traditions have that same element.
They do. Now, as we continue to as we continue to discuss this, I think we're going to get closer and closer to experiences that suggest, I'll throw this out here, that shape-shifting might actually be real.
Potentially, yes.
And in some cases, or in some regions, it might be possibly more common than we would probably feel comfortable with.
That's very true, and I think a good illustration is just kind of what we said about the Ozark Howler in the beginning of our conversation, that in the region we tell tall tales to outsiders to fool them and denote who's the outsider. The same thing holds true with these kind of situations, that where it seems to be more common, there is a veil kind of woven in the stories to keep strangers, foreigners, away from the truth.
Yes. And even to the point that I think it's one of those things that the way I envision is largely two blocks. There's the block of exotic pop culture that is very enticing, that is very fun to contemplate, and then you go, watch your 2005 werewolf movie, and or try to. I'll say try to, and then you go back to your normal life. You go, wow, that's really cool. But we've somehow relegated this content into pure fiction that just enough of our mind can imagine is real to get an adrenaline high off of, or be, gratuitously interested in for a little while before we go back to real life. Beyond that is moving into that block of potential realization of basically going, oh crap, this is real. Now what?
Right. And what do I do?
And what do I do? Because at that point, you're no longer watching characters on a screen. And realistically at that point, your likely poorly constructed cosmology that tells you that you're sane has begun to be dismantled. So there's an issue with that. It reminds me, and I really appreciated this. It was actually an unanticipated H.P. Lovecraft quote. There are horrors beyond life's edge that we do not suspect, and once in a while, man's evil prying calls them just within our range.
Oh, I like that. I don't think I've heard that particular quote before. I like
that. I had not either. That was a quote used by Archer Parquet in what was probably my favorite article on a comparatively unknown cryptid, unknown enough that I'd never heard of it before we started researching for this week. The Legend of the Beast of Bray Road, this being on MilwaukeeMag.com. That I think is a very fair comparison, because we're dealing with something in North America that might be a werewolf, might be a cryptid, might be something else entirely.
Might be spirit, might be a conjuring by a shaman. There's different iterations of it. And there's similar, there are some similar other legends of creatures. Some in some aspects similar to the Wendigo, as far as the versions that involve witchcraft. The Dogman legends, simply for the fact that it often is viewed as canine. Again, I guess the Beast of Bray Road, it got its name basically from a journalist who was covering the local folklore, and the legends went back at least about 100 years or more. And so that title was used in an article in the 90s talking about it, and the name stuck. But I find it very interesting because you have several different elements involved that in some of these tales, you feel like they're disconnected, disjointed, that don't fit together. But in this situation, they kind of fit together.
Things have a tendency to. And for full disclaimer, we are talking about a phenomena that is a folkloric phenomena that is outside the Ozarks, Elkhorn, Wisconsin. Reason we're including this discussion is because there are points of comparison, particularly in regards to potential shaman conjuring.
Yes.
With phenomena that has been observed in the Ozarks, and in this case, somewhat more documented phenomena, but also in North America. And the first alleged sighting that we know of was 1936. I found this really interesting. And the sighting was reported by a Mark Shackleman. He was a night watchman for the St. Coletta School for Exceptional Children, which, just for the record, I don't know whether or not it exists. I'm assuming it does because it's a Milwaukee magazine publication.
It did. I don't think the school's in existence now, but it did exist. I verified that.
The you're coming back to the you can't believe everything that is on the internet, mainly just because the school sounds like that Charles Xavier should be like the teacher for it. And we're watching a mutant movie, but that's, oh, Wolverine, you're a new cryptid. But a lot of this here, the Archer Parquet article authored article from milwaukeemagazine.com is probably my favorite. It's one of the best written cryptid articles that I have read in a really long time. So I highly recommend it. But the Night Watchman was, and so there was a couple of key points. One, that it was a former Franciscan convent outside of Jefferson, Wisconsin. And two, that on the open fields was preserved Native American burial grounds. And this creature was observed digging in the burial ground, in the burial mound.
Yes. And I actually watched a documentary I was telling you about the other day, where they were talking about it, and they had cross-referenced sightings of the Beast of Bray Road with the effigy mounds. Some of the mounds are burial mounds, some of them are not. They're just effigies. But the known sightings all occur around the mounds in a I think it's about a 40-mile radius. And there's a very strong correlation for the location. And in fact, Bray Road goes through some of the area with mounds, and actually part of the road actually goes across one of the effigies. Oof. It's an effigy of a man. It's several hundred feet long, and the road actually goes across where part of the legs are. And to be fair, when looking at the topography, around the road, you don't particularly see it. And it kind of was alluded that perhaps it was eroded by the time that the road was put through. So they speculate that is one reason that this creature is seen so much along that road.
Yeah. And this is rapidly moving into some comparatively uncomfortable territory of a beast, we'll call it a beast at the moment, that is outside of the realm of regular biology.
Right.
It functions similarly to things we recognize. For example, sort of like a wolf, sort of like a bear, but it's none of those things. And something that is, to me, is really interesting about a lot of these experiences, that the person, it might be dark, they might be driving, they see a thing, of course, in hindsight, it's very easy to say you were mistaken, it was low light, you don't know what you saw, it was a mangy bear. Of course, for the record, a bear without hair is absolutely terrifying. It looks very unnatural. Or just a wide variety of things. But something that it seems to be very consistent with these experiences is a sense of knowing that something is off.
Yes, that something, a foreboding feeling, or that just something is not as it should be. Another thing that the documentary references, a landowner who has land along the road and near some of the mounds, has had sightings himself, and then he has trail cams up, and unusual photos will are taken when the motion sensor is triggered, and often is a mist. That and to be frank, I mean, from investigating the paranormal for years, most mist photos are misidentified as fog or, you know, smoke or something. They were very interesting because it was a very contained area, often in daylight. And a lot of the accounts, witness accounts, will say that they see some sort of mist around it, that the creature seems to just appear and disappear within the mist, almost as if it's stepping through the veil. And there, it's led to speculation that the creatures were conjured by shaman, you know, hundreds of years ago to protect the mounts.
Yes. And this is getting into an area of conjecture that I'm gonna, I mean, we're like totally public here. I'm gonna say I have strong leanings of belief in this. I do. I'm, you know, and that may be, you know, people might laugh about that. I don't care. But you know, what we're talking about is moving past a purely academic, you know, assessment of things like hoodoo conjuring and and conjuring of similar origin, whether it's cunning folk of Northern Europe, or whether it's medicine men or shamans of North America, or whether it's a hoodoo or traditional conjuring of a West African origin. Each of these belief structures have these elements. We've you have documented the potential of a hoodoo conjuring at Kendrick House. Not as dramatic as the Bray Road monster.
No.
But still, you know, the idea of a protective consciousness.
Yes.
That it seems to be associated.
It's witnessed by a number of people over time. Yes.
Yes. Along with odd occurrences sort of surrounding the that seem to connect not only to the potential location of the conjuring, but also potentially to the spirit of the individual who did the conjuring.
Yes, very much so. And in that regard, it's very similar to some of these stories about the Beast of Bray Road, is that seems to be connected perhaps to whoever conjured it, assumption being shaman. And then if you look at those native beliefs, there are beliefs that at least some shaman could shapeshift themselves.
Right. So we're dealing with several different possibilities. Once you step past the threshold of that can't happen, we're now and some folks may be ready to do that, some folks may not, in respect to either side of that. But once you choose or you do step past that point, now we're dealing with the possibility that someone deeply skilled in magic could potentially shapeshift themselves. And that's number one. Number two, someone deeply skilled in magic could create a conjuring. Typically, it seems to be in terms of protection of something, a guardian.
Typically, yes.
Not necessarily always. You can't really deal with those kind of absolutes at this point, but it seems to be let's create something to protect something. But the idea that we're opening the veil and something specifically is coming through.
Yes.
That's, and then separately, category number 3 is that shaman may have died and his or her spirit may also remain.
Yes, I mean that's potentially a theory, and that lines up with some of the beliefs of tribes in the Ozark regions too. Is that one, you have ancestor spirits that are protective and interact, and 2, that there are other spirits that can be mischievous or a little bit of a trickster, and are spirit and physical form, which depending on the circumstance, which basically is the definition of a shapeshifter.
Correct. Very, very correct. I've heard more than one account. This is more out in Oklahoma, of seeing basically semi-wolf like creatures, but with human like characteristics that seem to be able to run and jump, run very quickly, jump very high, seen in relationship to like vehicles, highways, that sort of thing.
Yes. And in that regard, the Beast of Bray Road is similar. One interesting thing, it often, when it's seen, is eating roadkill, which gives a semblance of a corporal body.
Yeah. Yes.
That the head often is described looking like a wolf, but the face looking more like a domestic dog, a little less ferocious.
Yes.
Than a lot of sort of dog creature accounts are.
Right. and I think along with that, typically, and this is, also from the accounts that I've heard, is individuals who do witness one of these, first of all, there's like a point where the rational brain is just going, what on earth did I just see? I don't understand. But
right.
another yeah, another side, sort of a, maybe a more mammal brain instinct that says, I can't explain it verbally, but I know the space that I'm in is not right and I need to get out.
Yeah. And what I find interesting about this tale is that the behavior of the creature is not so much aggressive to attack and chase as to just warn people away from where it's at.
Yes. And there's so something in regards to the mist that I think is interesting. I'm assuming that it was interesting because you need something physical to kick off the game can.
Well, yeah, movement. They're triggered by motion. So, and typically what they catch, they will be a free floating dark mist, and generally it looked like it was, 4 or 5 feet in diameter. Did not look like, campfire smoke or anything, or blowing in the wind or anything. Interesting, not what you typically see in those kind of photos. And a lot of them were in broad daylight, so it wasn't that, it's dark and what am I really seeing type thing.
And what I think, is fascinating about this particular situation, it's very suggestive of that transition of essentially the opening of the veil.
Yes. But I think, when you think about it, I mean, we've talked about this before on the show, it is very reminiscent of some of the phenomena observed around mounds in the Ozarks.
It is. It is. And
which gives it a little more credibility to me.
It does, around mounds and in some cases, sacred spaces on tribal lands.
Yes.
That it just sort of to wrap up on this, sort of the subject of, it may be something that is coming out of this mist, it may be something that is forming, coming through the veil, but whatever it is, when it gets here, it is not a phantom.
No, it does not appear to be a phantom, including eating
Exactly.
roadkill or whatever.
Exactly. So it comes through hungry.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, transfiguration, I'm sure would do that to you.
Does for me on a regular basis. Anybody who follows my Instagram account knows that. But yeah, so this particular initial account, the Shackleman saw a shadow hunched on all fours, digging into one of the Indian mounds.
Mm-hmm.
And it was digging like a dog or like a wolf, but it was way too big. And then he comes up on it, and it basically unfolds into an over 6 foot tall creature with a sleek, hairy body, shaggy canine face, thick fur, but muscular, like more like a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And then it growled, and it smelled like rotting meat, and then it ran off and disappeared.
Yes. And then actually, in some accounts, I don't know if that article said, he actually went back the next night to the same spot, found where there had been digging, and actually saw the creature a second time.
Yes. And, if the account is true, my hat's off to Mr. Shackleman for going back on night number 2.
No doubt. No doubt. It'd be easy to say I'm out, although I think I think it was on his rounds as part of his job, so paycheck may have been quite an incentive.
And that's very fair. It's there is a Lovecraftian aspect to this, in the sense of things coming through.
Yeah.
And that's definitely, something that Lovecraft tapped into, in terms of a deep archetypal horror that I think many people have in the back of our minds. And
something that's just completely, beyond our capabilities. So if something can do that, what else can it do? I think is that primal fear.
It is, and it's definitely, that sense of the unknown. Now, jumping over into some vampiric legend, which I think is also fascinating to me, is that vampires are traditionally associated with mist.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they are.
And vampires are also associated with shapeshifting.
Yes.
And so,
perhaps,
of course, there's
more of a correlation with mist and shapeshifting than
what's that?
Maybe there's more correlation with mist as a part of shapeshifting than we've given a lot of thought to over time.
I'm curious about that. And dealing with, sort of extrapolating on these elements, the aspect that the vampiric legends may be a conflation of a naturally occurring ancient occurrence that then got dressed up with Gothic and sort of post-Catholicism lore to try to make it make sense.
That's possible. And I guess one other wrinkle I can throw in there, I know I don't know if we've talked about it on the show, but we've talked about it, is that, and this goes back to voodoo tradition. I've seen practitioner shroud their appearance.
Yes.
With aura, with a mist, and including and interesting. I saw this later. They were surprised because the explanation was that the living's not supposed to see that. You do that to keep spirits from seeing you. Someone else that was present, their comment was afterwards, when this person walked away, was, I know it sounds crazy, but I can't remember what he looked like.
Yeah.
But did not recall seeing the actual mist.
Yes.
And so perhaps this is something that is just more, as you said, something ancient that's being tapped into.
Yeah. It's now coming to the 1936 account of the Bray Road monster. It smelled like rotted meat. Now we have other accounts that it's eating roadkill.
Mm-hmm.
Now coming over to vampiric legend, what do vampires do?
They drink blood.
Feed. Exactly.
Yeah.
They need to feed. Something
Yes.
that seems to be very consistent with this traditional lore is that something seems to come through, but it comes through hungry.
Yes. Well, even the classic werewolf tales. What does a werewolf do on the full moon?
It feeds.
It feeds. It attacks animals.
Yes. Now it does bring up the question in much more traditionalist societies that might have understood the mechanics of this better.
Yeah,
it could make sense in terms of offerings.
that's an interesting thought. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, because offerings typically for conjurings are food or drink.
Mm-hmm. The idea that if you bring this thing through for a specific purpose, you need to be prepared to give it an offering when it gets there, which then brings up the question, if the mechanics are essentially left in place and this thing keeps getting conjured through, but there is no ritual offering for it, it may be desperate to eat or to feed when it gets here.
Very true, very true. And in some situations, it's, I see that would result exactly in these sightings that are happening in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, and other connotations. It seems that particularly in hoodoo voodoo traditions, that if the offerings aren't there, the conjurer doesn't necessarily go out to feed, but becomes restless and just basically starts playing, won't act against what it was created for, but it certainly will be more mischievous.
Right.
It's angry, basically.
Yeah. Yes. Don't leave your conjuring hangry. That's our takeaway for tonight. And honestly, who could blame it? I mean, nobody likes to be hangry.
Exactly. So maybe there are some universal truths. That's one.
I think so. I think that's it's an interesting conjecture, especially in terms of the potential of the what might be the actual origin of the vampire legend. Now one bit, and of course this is America's, it's not North America, but it's America's, that I found really interesting, is a Sokiad. And
yes,
it's a legend from Trinidad, and there are, in terms of lore, there is a North American connection, because It's a little bit of a more graphic version of a boo hag.
Yes, and I actually, once we get a little further in, I have something else I'm going to throw out there.
Okay, so it's from Trinidad. The Sokiant is a witch and a reclusive, dangerous old woman. And by night, she strips off her skin and puts it into a mortar and emerges as a fireball that flies across the dark sky in search of a victim. The Sokiant can enter the home of a victim through any size of a hole or a crack, and she sucks people's blood, leaving marks in their body.
Angry.
Very hangry, exactly. and in some cases may draw too much blood, causing the victim to die. And that if you die at the hands of the Sokiant, first of all, you might become a Sokiant yourself, or if you also, she might take your skin and assume your form, and that's also very much a boo hag concept. That says
boo hag, and you're treading on skinwalker ground there too a little bit.
Yes, there seems to be a very strong European element to this, in that the Sokiant or the boo hag counts things. I don't know why yet, but the idea that you leave a pile of rice out and she'll have to stop and count all the rice and become so distracted.
That's true of vampire lore too.
Yes, it is. So there's a lots of, and of course Caribbean is notable in terms of its intersection of all three of these lores.
Yes, very, very much so. Very much so. Here's something to throw out. One aspect that's interesting, I think, with this lore is that she turns into a ball of flame or a light.
I thought so.
Which goes back to spook lights.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And it also comes to mind in the fact that Spooklight Road, the immediate area, and even some surrounding areas are particularly notable for paranormal occurrences.
Yes, as well as Native American connections.
Yes, very much so. And so it does bring up the question and possibility that the spooklight may be a long-standing conjuring itself.
I mean, nothing else has been explained. And then, and of course there are ghost lights or spook lights other places in the Ozarks and around the world too, but Gordon Cross, there's a couple of others lesser known that, who knows? I mean, nothing else has really been explained, and especially the Hornet spook light south of Joplin. Universities, the Corps of Engineers. I mean, everyone's come in and not had any satisfactory answers. So,
right, the fact that there aren't, the area where we often land is simply an unknown but natural phenomena in sort of the realm of earth lights. The idea that there's, for example, within, just purely conjecture, but the idea that within the Earth's crust, a lot of energy being produced with, plates pushing together, perhaps plates in relationship to Ozark quartz crystal, creating a type of energy or an type of energy output of which we don't understand or cannot currently record in particular areas, and that's producing this natural phenomena. The one thing that it seems to be observable about the spook light, and I thought that too when I read that about the Sukyan. I was like, ball of fire that moves anyway. But
Yeah, no, I guess we should say that there's no tales that I know of predation, so I don't think the spook like has been looking for victims. So
right.
it scared a few farmers in their barns, but that's about it. And couples in cars, but other than that,
right. Not predation, but something that seems to be associated with the spook light is almost intelligent or semi-intelligent behavior, reacting to things, reacting to noises, and natural earth magnetic phenomena would not typically do that.
And movements that don't really indicate just randomness or being aligned with magnetism or something like that. No.
Right. And to me, there's a lot of parts to this. One of the things that we've referenced hoodoo a lot tonight, and I think that probably bears some explanation if people are not familiar. Hoodoo is not voodoo. Voodoo is an organized religion. Hoodoo is a series of practices. It's very pragmatic in its structure, and it is largely West African through Santo Domingo and Haiti in conceptual origin, largely, or West African to the original colonies in origin, and then again, to me the historic and cultural theme of hoodoo is one of pragmatism and survival and reaction to situation, and so consequently there's the involvement of, you know, kind of the sense of, okay, what works,
right,
and consequently if you you know, as an individual within a culture, if you are encountering other folk religion that seems to work or does work, that you just incorporate it in, because because there's certainly there is a cultural identity associated with hoodoo, but also there's just a great deal of simple pragmatism associated. So there's less of the, you know, you don't have, as one researcher noted, Megan Lane, actually, from Hoodoo Heritage, A Brief History of American Folk Religion, published through Appalachian State University in 2008, is that there isn't a holy scripture to hoodoo.
No, and there's not a sense of morality innately in it. It's, you know, it is, and then the purposes it's used for is a separate issue.
Yes.
I think one interesting aspect for people to understand is that it's a belief system. It can be denoted as a religion, but it's not contained in scripture.
Yes. And even in the sense that that it differentiates from voodoo, in the sense that voodoo is a recognized religion in a more formal sense.
Yes, well, and particularly it incorporates a lot of aspects of Catholicism specifically, which hoodoo doesn't. Again, it's practicality, and if it works, it works, and it's up to the practitioner if they use it for good or ill, and the consequences thereof. It's which not everyone would probably agree, and some would take issue with me, but I think that's, to be perfectly honest, more honest than some of the belief systems that everything has to be black or white. I think gray is much more reality and how the world functions, not only in this context, but other things as well.
Very much so. Very much so. And I concur with that.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. I largely think of it. I think it's helpful to conceptualize hoodoo as a tool set.
Yes.
And the tool set includes sharp objects and a variety of tools for a variety of applications. And it is up to the conjurer to determine what the application is going to be.
Exactly. The old saying, the right tool for the right job.
and with so for people, if people are wondering where on earth I'm going with this, so it's the folk practice of hoodoo is a conflation or a combination of traditional European folk religions, as well as Native American religion, but with the dominant force being the West African practices.
Right.
And that they found that the practitioners of these very practices found a surprising amount of common ground, sort of under the radar, so to speak, of authoritarian structures.
Very much so. And there's some similarity with practitioners from Northern European traditions.
Yes.
There's a lot of parallels. And so, and when these groups found each other in the same pot, so to speak, in America, they recognized what each was doing and incorporated.
Yes. And I think I find that really, overall, I find that really, I don't know, inspiring, really, just in terms of a story of humanity. There was, and it, in regards to our primary topic tonight, a key element of conjuring does involve stories of shapeshifting.
Shape-shifting, as well as ghosts, etc., which again is another form of transfiguration, if you want to be literal about it.
Yeah, it's very, very true. That's I really like that there was one reference in the U.S. war against the Seminoles in Florida, that an escaped slave conjurer was reported to have helped the Seminoles in their war throughout the war, and that he was known as Uncle Monday. And that when the Seminoles lost and were going to be forcibly moved to Indian Territory, modern day Oklahoma, so there's your connection with the Ozarks, is that rather than be removed with them, he escaped by transforming himself into an alligator.
Yes, and there's also lore that Chief Osceola was a shapeshifter himself.
I did not know that. I did not know that. What do we know of the lore?
I don't know a lot in depth, but I've seen a couple of different references where basically accounts where other natives would say that he was a shifter. But I haven't found anything with a great deal of detail, but I just find that very interesting that he's been referred to that way.
I do too. I think that's something that also seems to be the case in these regards. It's a very obviously it's not something that shows up in your larger overarching historic narratives.
Right.
None of this is. which is part of the fascination of it. In regards to this, to me anyway, it seems to show up in these very individualistic narratives, and oftentimes presented without a lot of hype, in the sense that so and so just said, you fill in the blank, and you read it and you go, wait, what?
Yeah, it's very matter of fact. Yeah, and that's the account, the two accounts that I've read about Osceola is just very matter of fact that he was referred to that way.
Yeah, and it's just that that, again, to me, that individualism, the individual's story, the individual's experience. Oftentimes, I'm quite fascinated by Uncle Mundy, in the sense of assisting in a rebellion that was essentially a lost cause. And then at the point, and regardless of whether he really did turn himself into an alligator or not, there is an archetypal story there that says, are you going to submit to this overarching authority? No.
There is a way.
There's always a way to get around it. There's always a way to respond that is not the way that I've been told. And I think, regardless of how anybody does or doesn't believe in terms of shapeshifters, I think that there's a deep archetypal truth there about humanity.
Yes, and why we elevate those characters to folklore status, that don't just march to the drum that they're told to march to.
Yes. And something in terms of the research this afternoon for tonight's episode, something that really jumped out to me in terms of a failure of authoritarian structure, going back to Haiti, 1685, Louis XIV issues the Black Code, that is designed to prevent insurrection by the slaves in Haiti, and makes it illegal for the West Africans to do anything other than worship to convert to Catholicism.
Right.
And in essence signs into law the development of voodoo as an organized religion. Pretty
much, because they just took what they knew and layered Catholicism over the top of it, basically.
Yes. And
you could say in some ways that that power of belief, of course, could have made what they already believed and practiced even more powerful.
Which is an interesting possibility. Of course, in terms of pop culture and public consciousness, although the sort of negative connotations of voodoo created by 20th century pop culture, and it's associated relationship with negative connotations of race, that you can decry that, but what you cannot escape is that while it might still be misunderstood in many cases, as a result, voodoo is recognized internationally.
Yes.
It is often, while it might be misunderstood, it is very much respected and feared. And that's certainly something that most other religions cannot claim.
That's true. that is true. And I think that, to be perfectly honest, my personal opinion of that is it's feared by other Christians, which ostensibly have the same belief system.
Right.
But it's perceived that practitioners of voodoo have more personal power.
Yes.
That others are not going to be able to weld, mainly because they don't understand the tool set, as you said.
Yes.
And so it's familiar yet scary.
It's familiar enough to be relatable on one level, and unknown enough to be terrifying.
Exactly. Well, I understand this up to this point, but then why can't, but I can't do that, or I don't understand this other part.
Yes.
But somehow they're all related,
Right.
in that belief system.
Yes, and I think a lot of the innate fear response is actually associated with that layer of Christian iconography.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah, and part of it, I mean, is that it's now gonna voice sort of my own opinion on this. I consider the belief structures of these original regions, we'll call it that, whether that's here in North America, or the Celts, which we've talked a lot about, or West Africa, or fill in the blank. These are, I see them as highly sophisticated cosmological systems that deserve a lot of respect, but in throughout the sort of the history of the period of colonialism, that was not seen as, that's not how they were often viewed.
No, be perfectly honest, not at all. Which, to survive, they became quiet and went underground, so to speak, under the radar, which again gives that sense of illusion and secret power that
it does. With
that creation of fear actually, I think, fuels the power of that system as well.
Yes, with the one, and obviously I know that there's going to be other exceptions as well, but an interesting exception is the one you already noted, which is voodoo, particularly in New Orleans, functioning as almost an island, a cultural island, very, very separate. And the fact that within New Orleans, historically, certain things that couldn't be done anywhere else could be done in New Orleans, and still can.
Yes, and I think in part, I think that no disrespect to the Big Apple, but New Orleans probably is the biggest melting pot there ever was in America, and not just ethnicity, but culturally. A unique blend that I think has allowed that to flourish.
Yes.
You certainly don't have to be a devotee of voodoo to want to go to Mary Laveau's grave.
Very true. Very true. And Laveau is internationally recognized.
Yes. And as extremely powerful, but yet she epitomized the marginalized practitioner. So
and also I think something, a subject matter that I think peripherally is associated with this topic point, particularly in terms of shamanism, etc., is that much older, more traditionalist societies held space for an individual within their community group who, in essence, walked between worlds.
Yes, and that was true in Europe as well. I think here in North America, we tend to associate ourselves with the European belief systems so much that we forget that
Mhm.
was allowed and was fairly routine. And
Mhm.
it's more, once you get to North America, that's not allowed and suddenly doesn't fit. And it reminds me of a quote from uh, a very elderly nun who I knew years ago, who actually also was an attorney. And conversation, someone was lamenting about certain issues that we just haven't figured out how to deal with these, issues in our society, and that in particular what was being discussed seemed to be handled better in Europe. And the comment was, you have to remember, we are a very young country. Other places have had much longer to look at these things and figure things out. And I think it kind of goes with this too, is that we have a disconnect with those thousands of years of tradition that
Mhm.
existed in Europe and Africa. That suddenly everything's thrown in, and we kind of, let's throw everything, the baby out with the bathwater and forget everything. And everything has to be in nice, neat little boxes.
Mhm. And modernism can become a very dangerous
Mm-hmm.
goal.
And modernism got thrown right in with that, and I think embraced it around the world, but particularly in North America, I think.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think that there's, as a point of comparison, uh, look at how um, Salem, Massachusetts responded to the potentiality of witchcraft as opposed to New Orleans responding to the potentiality of Marie Laveau, who was in essence a powerful and feared community leader.
Well, and basically Marie Laveau was sought out by the aristocracy and those with power.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in other situations, practitioners were subjugated.
Yes.
And yes, if you had that same mix that you had in New Orleans and Salem, it would have been a very different story.
Very different story. And something else that I'm going to reference the Brief History of American Folk Religion by Megan Lane again brought up is that, and I want to look more into this, but the incidence of hoodoo and or witchcraft, of course, was quite common throughout the South. Mm-hmm. We oftentimes associate the South with a variety of negative terms. I don't typically, but we just have a negative. We have messy history wherever we go. That's the reality of it. But pointed out that is sort of a point of comparison in the northeastern region of present day United States. Response to witchcraft, this is not her words, this is mine, but response to witchcraft was to freak out and potentially kill people or exile them, and much more in the South was to just find a power doctor, a conjure doctor, to take the spell off.
Exactly. Fight fire with fire.
Yeah. And a level of pragmatism. Something that was also brought up that I think is not part of our sort of public consciousness at this at this juncture point is that conjure doctors, root workers, essentially African Americans, slaves in the South who were conjure doctors, were oftentimes revered and potentially feared and respected, not only by the slave population, but in some cases by their owners and by other whites.
Yeah, that that's a dynamic that often is not discussed or looked at. But I think in so many contexts, you have that situation where there'll be someone that seems to have that sway that you can't explain objectively, and conjure doctors certainly would fall into that often in the
Mhm.
South.
And of course, these are not overarching or exclusive
No.
situations, but I did find it very interesting. And I think for me, certainly, of course, it's kind of off the subject of shapeshifters, but also including is just that reality that history is messy, history is complex. Just when you think you have something nailed down and you know exactly what it's like, if you continue to dig, you will come up with something. You will come across something that contradicts your monolithic belief system.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is it goes back to the conversation of hoodoo itself. It's gray. It's not black and white.
It's not. It's not. Would we dare say that sometimes there's no easy answers?
I think that's apropos, yes. Almost as if that was planned.
Oh, we couldn't have done it better if we tried. And we don't plan these things. We really don't.
We don't.
Set your calendar dates for March 12th. We hope that you'll join us at the Coleman Theater in
Yeah.
Miami, Oklahoma, on Saturday, March 12th. Just a little over a week and a half away.
Yeah, it's coming up pretty fast, and excited.
It's going to be great. If you have questions, comments, please feel free to share with us. We always look forward to hearing from people. If you've had this personal shifter story and would like to share, we would love to hear it.
Yes, we would. And even if you don't want to share publicly, we would
Mhm.
keep your confidence. So
Absolutely. We appreciate that. And this is exciting. This was a fun night.
it really was. I had fun.
Yeah, me
Night,
too.
everyone.
Night,
Night, John.
everybody. Night, Lisa.